short. I love that they started doing the recording in progress thing is now. It just really, do you guys hear that? Did everybody hear that when it started? It's just so weird. It's like in the middle of talking and it's just, this robot voice. So this passage is short, but there's a lot there. There's a lot for us to talk about. So let's jump in. I'm going to share my screen like this. There we go. You all see that? So actually, I'm sorry. Let me stop sharing. I want to actually show you a video clip of this passage. I've shown you a clip from this movie before, the Gospel of Mark. I just like that they read the actual passage, and it kind of gives you a visual of what it might have actually looked like. So Molly's going to cue that up real quick, and then we're just going to watch it. There's another clip that I watched, a different version. One part that I liked about the other version was that it actually showed, it talks about the wealthier people who had a lot of money, large sums of money, it says, and they were putting it in, but the way they were doing it was like kind of just a little bit at a time, and they were kind of standing there for a long time. They were even like talking to other people as they were doing it. And I can imagine how, and we're going to kind of dive into what this might have looked like, but I can imagine how it kind of became like a show, if you have people kind of there and, people walking by and, oh, look at how much that person gave. And here you have this widow who had little to nothing to give. Here we go with my slides. So again, just looking at this passage and, what it has to say to us, just some of the things that we notice as we're looking at this very short story. And as we always say, we can't look at these stories without looking at what's happened, before it. So if you were part of our study this past week, you'll remember that Jesus, he just finished calling out some of the scribes. So we have Jesus doing this. He's talking about, he's looking at the treasury. It says he's sitting opposite the treasury. But just before this, he called out the scribes for a very specific purpose, and it connects to this. And so in order to get a better understanding, let's actually go back and look at that passage from this past week that many of us looked at. If you were in the study, it would have been verses 38 through 40. It says, as he taught, he said, beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes and to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to have the best seats in the synagogues, places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses, and for the sake of appearance, they say long prayers. They will receive the greater condemnation. So the scribes and the Pharisees, there were two groups in the gospel that are mentioned a lot. And we most often see Jesus having these tense interactions with them, right? Some of the scribes might have actually been Pharisees, the teachers of the law, but the scribes were different. And if you hear about the scribes, you may be wondering, what were the scribes? What was their deal? How are they different? Why are they a distinct group? The scribes' unique responsibility was that they were able to draft legal documents. Some of you have worked in finance or even government, and you know about legal documents. And some of you are actually work in law, like Wes, about legal documents, can be very wordy. And it's very important to know, understand, to read small print, fine print. The scribes would have been about that. They would have been able to draft documents like marriage, divorce, loans, inheritance, mortgages, sale of land. Those would have been the kinds of things that scribes would have been able to do. So thinking about it that way, it makes sense that Jesus would specifically call out the scribes, because why? Why is he calling out the scribes for this kind of greediness? Because see, the scribes would have known who had money, which family, for example, had come into a large inheritance, or which man had purchased land before he died and left it to his widow. So we don't, Jesus doesn't actually say, I kind of wish Jesus would have said, like, beware of scribes, like like Jehu over there, or like Ahab over there. Like I wish you would have like given like, oh, so what was Ahab doing? I want to know. He didn't give any specific. He called, and it was almost like, when you hear a sermon, or you hear somebody talking, and you know that what they're saying is like about you, and it just like convicts you, and you can either like get really angry, like how dare he talk about me, or you feel that twinge of conviction and guilt, right? He didn't say the name, but I'm sure if there were any scribes around, then they would have heard him, and they would have felt that tug in their heart. And maybe if there were people who knew about some of these scribes who do these things, it says that people were listening to him with delight. I'm sure if there was injustice happening, I'm sure there were some people who were like, yes, finally somebody's saying something, right? I'm sure the scribes knew what they were doing. And this is one of the reasons why they hated him. They wanted to kill him, right? Do you remember back in chapter 11, how Jesus entered the temple courts, right? After he had his triumphal entry on the donkey, and then he comes into the courts, and what did Jesus start doing? Does anybody remember? He was really happy at what he saw, and he praised the temple leaders for their godly leadership. What was Jesus's feeling? Was he happy? He was enraged. We don't really see Jesus get enraged like that, other than when he went into the temple. He saw the money changers and the animal sellers, and because they had turned it into a den of thieves when it was supposed to be a house of prayer for all people. I want to show you a little bit about what the temple would have looked like at this time, to give you an idea of where this and other parts of the story had taken place. So kind of a rendering. This temple was, destroyed, but so the court of Gentiles, you see there at the bottom, there's this outer court area. I'm gonna make this little gray box smaller so it doesn't get in our way. I don't know if you can see that, but I think you probably can. So these outer court areas on the outsides, that would have been the court of the Gentiles, and that's where the money changers and the sellers of animals and everything would have been. The court of Gentiles is where everyone was allowed, including the Gentiles, which is why Jesus said this should be a house of prayer for all people, right? And instead it had been turned into a den of thieves. And now we see Jesus is sitting where the treasury, when it talks about the treasury, most scholars are going to place that in what was called the court of women. So you see the court of women is a little bit further inside, which is why the poor widow was there, because women were allowed a little bit further in. The Jewish women were allowed to enter a little further in than the Gentiles were. But then beyond that, there was the court of Israel, and that was where only the men could go. And of course, the priests, they could go further than that. So we see this poor widow, among many other rich people, rich and poor alike, giving her money to the temple treasury. And so this is where it would have happened. All people who were able to go in there, they would give their money to the treasury. I'll stop sharing from it. So most scholars will believe that the temple treasury wasn't just holding funds for the temple, but that the temple actually acted like a kind of bank. It was thought at that time that the temple would have been the safest place to hold people's money. And of course, it was assumed that if they were the temple leaders and they were overseeing the money, then they would have been honest, and they could be trusted to handle it honestly and fairly, right? You give your funds to the temple, to the religious leader, people who honored God, you would assume that they would handle it in the right way. But regardless of how this money might have been handled, whether or not special favor would have been given to those who gave more, those who gave less were overlooked and dismissed. Regardless of any of that, this poor widow didn't seem to care about any of that. She was coming to give her contribution to the temple as Jewish people were expected to do, and she gave, as Jesus said, all that she had. So, and here we see again Jesus, so many times. It blows my mind how many times Jesus does this, again, giving voice to those who are powerless, uplifting the lowly and the oppressed. He recognized her gift, and he taught the disciples to recognize what she did. Not only was she poor, she was a widow. Women were already of lower social status than men. even Jewish women, but a woman was considered of very little value in society when she did not have a husband to work and provide for her. So, woman, but now her husband's dead. That's a really tough spot to be. I thought about something as I was reading this again. There's a reason why we see Jesus warning of the scribes who devour widows' houses. And then immediately we see him uplifting this poor widow. As I mentioned before, there likely would have been widows who weren't poor. Maybe their husbands left them land or money. So maybe like financially they were okay. They didn't have a husband. They still would have been of, a lower status, but at least they had something. They have these resources, but then as Jesus said, there's these wolves who slip in and they see the opportunity and they use their respective positions of spiritual social authority and they take advantage of these women. Jesus knew this was happening. I don't think Jesus was just making this up. This was really happening. Scribes were doing this. I wonder, was this widow always poor? When Jesus is looking at this widow, he just got done talking about these scribes who will devour widows' houses. And now he's looking at this poor widow who has giving all she has left, which is nothing. It's kind of a creepy, mind-blowing thought that maybe this widow wasn't always poor. Maybe she did have enough to support herself. Maybe she used to be able to give more to the temple treasury, but maybe something happened. Maybe someone slipped in and took advantage of her. And that's a terrible thought. She wasn't just poor, that someone made her poor. And it wasn't just anybody who made her poor. It was actually somebody who was supposed to be a spiritual leader and a shepherd, someone who would care for someone in her position. That is something that I hadn't considered before, that this poor widow might have been made poor by somebody taking advantage of her. So Jesus gets upset at what is becoming of the temple, what's happening in the court of the Gentiles, what's happening with the treasury and the people who are giving. So we see, we already know Jesus has passion and zeal for his Father's house. We already know that Jesus sees right through the hypocrisy of the scribes and the Pharisees, but he's really going at these religious leaders. When you think about Jesus finally coming to a point where he is arrested and killed, Jesus was compassionate and kind to the poor. He uplifted those who were the oppressed and the lowly in status. But for the powerful people, he was a pain in the butt. He was going right at them. And I don't know if you notice this when we study this, right? More and more, Jesus is really going. You see just a few passages before, he's actually teaching in the temple now. We haven't really seen him teach much in the temple. He's been teaching outside the temple. Now he's moving into the temple, and he's actually using that time when he's teaching to call out the people who would normally be the, everyone who's who in the temple. Imagine if, as a church, we invited a special guest speaker to come, and we invited this person to come speak, and he has all this, and and then he uses that time to like call out me and Molly and Abner, and I'd be like, hey, what the heck, man? We didn't invite you here to do that. We didn't invite you as a special guest to our church to, now I know it's different. They didn't invite Jesus to be there. What I'm saying is he's in their turf. He's in there, like the place where they're supposed to be leading, and they're the respected ones. They're the ones who have the status. You know what I'm saying? And then Jesus is coming in there and he's calling them out. He is exposing them. Piece by piece, Jesus is dismantling this system that the temple leaders had been maintaining, which was working to their advantage. Maybe these scribes aren't the ones who set up the system, but they were sure taking advantage of it. They were taking advantage of the people that they could, and Jesus was exposing it. It doesn't matter if it's the pagan Ephesians who were selling their idols, as we saw in the book of Acts, or the Jewish scribes who were taking advantage of the poor widows. When you start messing with the money, people get mad. And Jesus was messing with the money and religious influence and social status. He was touching the part that hurt. And one more thing I want to point out is that it actually tells what this woman gave. And what this woman gave was really was small. It really wasn't very much. The translation we read here says it was a penny, or 1/64 of a denarius. Okay, it would have been like that, which would have been precisely, get ready for this, less than about 10 minutes wages for an average male worker. 10 minutes, I didn't say 10 days, 10 minutes, less than 10 minutes wages. It's not a lot. But that's what she had, and that's what she gave. So I give all of that. I know it seems like a lot of information in the temple and this and that, but I want to give you a picture of what was actually happening, what was the context, so that we can understand. If you try to just liken this to giving an offering at church, it was different. There were different kind of expectations, different regulations. It was different. In a church, a lot of times we pass around a collection plate, and people will throw in something or a check. And sometimes you're in the awkward position where you're like, oh, I already gave online, but I don't want people to think I didn't give anything. And so you just pass the plate on, but then you're thinking like, oh, what is other people thinking? And so there's this whole awkward thing. That's not what was happening here. It's different. It's a different kind of, we understand it in our thinking. It is different, but there are similarities as well. So as we focus in on what does all this mean for us? Let's break it down. First, we're going to focus on the widow and what her example teaches us. And because Jesus praised her, I thought we would take a minute and praise her too. All right. So if you know how to do this on Zoom, there's a way that you can actually go on to here and find at the bottom, if you hover over your screen, there's a reaction, and there's some clapping hands and thumbs up and a little celebration thing like that. See, like how on my screen, I kind of did that. So Jesus praised the widow. Jesus said, hey, she did a good thing. She gave all that she had. So we're going to celebrate the widow right now. Okay. We're going to give a thumbs up, a clap, a celebration for the widow. If Jesus celebrated her, then we're going to celebrate her, right? We like to say things like this, like, Lord, cause us to our hearts to break for what breaks your heart, and cause us to rejoice with what you rejoice over. So we're going to rejoice over this widow and what she did. And because we want to follow her example. Obviously, if Jesus is praising her for something, we want to follow her example. Thanks for indulging me in that for a minute. I mentioned how little she had given, and yet Jesus did praise her for giving all she had. So right away, what we can take away from this is that Jesus really doesn't want lots of money. That's not the point. As I shared with the kids a while back, we were talking a few weeks ago about giving, similar topic. I believe Jesse was the one talking about that. But I shared this with the kids. I said, Jesus doesn't need your money. But for kids, they don't really know about money, right? My kids are always like, oh, Daddy, why can't I have this? It's only $50. To them, 50 doesn't seem like a lot, right? But because it's like just like chunti, like nothing, like some cheap thing, like it's not worth $50. They don't understand it because they want it. So to them, they really want it. So it doesn't matter how much it costs. Like to them, there's no price too big. Like I want it, and they don't understand money. So I didn't try to talk about money with the kids. What I talked about was stuff, because they understand stuff. They like to get stuff, and then they get the stuff that they want. Oh, it drives me crazy when I finally get my kids the stuff that they want, and then like a day later, I see it like under the bed or in pieces. I'm like, oh, why did I give in again? They understand stuff. And so what I said is, Jesus doesn't want your stuff. And Jesus is not even against you getting stuff necessarily. What the problem is that Jesus says he doesn't want our stuff to get us. Same thing for money. Jesus doesn't want our money to get us, right? When your money and your stuff gets you, that means it controls you, it has you, it becomes your obsession. That's what matters to God. It's not the getting of stuff and money. It's when that stuff and money gets us. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? When I say get you, it's like, oh, it's going to get you. It's going to get you. You don't want your money and your stuff to get you. That's what matters to God. This is an important part of why we teach giving in the church, right? Not because we want to take advantage of anyone, but because it's a reminder to all of us that all we have belongs to God anyway. It comes from his hand, it belongs to him, and we're not slaves to it. It's an act of sacrifice. It's a symbolic act of saying, God, this all has come from your hand anyway, and I'm giving a portion of it to you. And here's the thing. Some of us do give out of abundance, and some of us give out of poverty. Here in River of Life, we're not a huge church, huge gathering of people, but we do have a diversity of people. Some of us have lots in the bank. Some of us have lots of cash stashed around our house or whatever. And some of us really, frankly, don't. That just shows that we're a pretty normal church family. We have a diversity of situations among us. And what we don't want is for any of us here today who are struggling financially, and please hear me, I don't want you to walk away from this message today, especially if you are one who's struggling financially. Walk away from this message today thinking, oh, Pastor Johnny told me I need to find a way to give more. Doesn't matter if I'm struggling financially, just give more because the widow. We want to be a church who uplifts those among us who are left with nothing. As a church, we should not be okay with having someone among us who can't afford to buy groceries or can't afford to get medications or can't afford to pay rent. And we see that in the early church, that the early church modeled that for us, right? They made sure that everyone who needed had, and they shared what they had among them, their resources, that there was no one who was left. And I can say that with confidence. All right, church family, if there's one of you who's like, hey, I'm going to be on the streets tomorrow because I can't pay my rent, or there's like nothing in my cupboard, that's not okay. We're not going to allow that to happen. And we have resources among us. And I'm not just talking about we have in our budget a benevolence fund. We have in our budget, we've set aside money, and we talked about this as leaders and as our board. We said we want to set aside this money so that we as a church can give to where the needs are. But even if we didn't have that, even if it was just, if we have resources among us where if somebody's going to be out on the streets tomorrow, we can do something about that. And how could we not? We're the church, right? Amen. I mean, how can we not? That's just being the church. That's not like, oh, we're a super, good Samaritan. We are the church. Now, do we ever have people in church who maybe do have resources, but they're throwing it away? They waste it on addictions, unnecessary spending. Yes. I've had experiences with families like that in church in my time pastoring, where they were always kind of right on the brink of eviction or tough situations. But you're thinking, well, they were given this gift over here, they had this, and so what's the problem? Where's all this money going? And there were times where we had to hold those people accountable. We had to say, hey, what's going on? And it turned out there was some really, really tough, bad stuff going on. And sometimes they didn't want to be held accountable. And it was, if they're willing to listen, then we can help them. And if they weren't, then it was a really, really sad situation sometimes. And I hate those situations, especially when there's kids involved, because it's not their fault. They're not the ones misspending their money. But there are some among us now, right, who are really struggling, and you're finding it really hard, just maybe even sometimes the basics. And I want to address that for a minute, okay? If you find yourself that you're really struggling financially, your pastors at River of Life we are not going to manipulate you into going broke so you can give offering to the church. I know here in America, we don't have poverty like they do in countries like, say, India or the Philippines, just as a couple of examples. But there's still poverty here. In San Gabriel Valley, just a few years ago, 2017, one statistic said that 42% of residents could not pay for their basic necessities because of medical debt. 42%, that is nearly half. It's a big number. And of course, we know because of the pandemic, loss of jobs, all the things that came along with that. Many families are still struggling, even more than they were before. And they probably will be for a long time. So I just say this to anybody who's in this kind of situation, please, if you're ever in need and you don't know where to turn, do not hesitate to come to your church family. I'm not saying that we have all the money. We're just going to throw money at problems, and we can look at other creative ways to deal with things. But we're not okay with anyone in our care going without what you need to live. Now, all that being said, even though some of us here are struggling financially, I know that there is still a desire to give. Some of you who are struggling financially will say, like, I really want to give. I just don't, have, and I know you want to be able to contribute to your church. And if that's the case, if you're struggling financially, but you want to give, let's make it simple. Let's just make it simple, right? Give what you can and find other ways to give. If you can't give everything that you wish you could give financially, find other ways to give. If you can't give all the money that you wish you could give, that's okay. And I can relate to that as well myself. But maybe we can find other ways that you can give, that you can contribute to the life of this church, right? Maybe you can give your time in helping with different ministries. And by the way, when we start opening up our church in person, there's going to be a lot more needs that we haven't had while we've been on Zoom, right? Being on Zoom just means that there's certain things that just aren't a necessity right now. Once we start opening, there's going to some of those necessities that are going to start coming up, and I'm sure we can find ways that people can contribute and give their of their gifts. You can spend time. You can give of your time. Time is a valuable resource. You can spend your time praying for people, calling to check in with people, or just being part of what River of Life is going to be doing. You can be a resource. Let us know, like, hey, I know a guy who does this, or I have a lady who does this, or I know somebody who can help out with that. Be a resource. People show love and care and importance in different ways, right? We call those love languages, right? Whatever your way is to do that, do it generously. All right, what did Jesus praise the widow for? She had nothing to give. She had nothing, but she still gave what she had. So what do you have? I want to share this with you just as kind of a reminder, something that might be helpful as we think about this. Is something you can take with you. You might not have abundant money, but what matters to God is that you have an abundant heart. I know it's easy to focus on what we don't have, because for those of us who don't have, those among us who don't have, it stares us in the face all the time, and it's hard to get away from it. But I just ask you that today, what do you have to give? You might not have abundant money, but what matters to God is that you have an abundant heart. And this goes for any of us, doesn't it? What does God really want from us? What does this story tell us that Jesus really expects from us? Jesus has a lot to say about rich and poor. But two scriptures that come to mind, just want to share these with you really quickly. Matthew 5:3, it says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And then Matthew 19:24 says, "Truly I tell you, it will be hard for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. It'll be easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who's rich to enter the kingdom of God." Is Jesus saying that it's automatically wrong to have money, so all people with wealth are evil? No. Is Jesus saying that all poor people are godly and that they will inherit the kingdom of heaven? No. What he's saying is that the poor in spirit will inherit the God's kingdom, that all the blessings of the riches of the kingdom of heaven will be theirs. To be poor in spirit means that there's an understanding and an attitude that without God and his loving kindness, I am nothing. I am impoverished. Everything I have comes from God's hand. Everything I don't have that I need, I trust God will provide it. Did you know that no matter how much money you have, you can still be poor in spirit? And even if you don't have much money, you can still consider that what you have belongs to the Lord because it came from his provision in the first place. Now, maybe I'm reading too much into this poor widow. Maybe she went home and she cursed God for making her poor widow. I doubt it, though. Knowing Jesus and the way that he read people and he knew what was going on at the heart level, I don't think he would have praised her if there was some kind of hypocrisy or darkness in her heart regarding her giving. From what we can tell and what Jesus said, she gave what she had, even though she didn't have abundant money, because she had an abundant heart. And that's what matters to Jesus. Really quickly, I just want to give you an example of my tia. Um, kind of brings tears to my eyes thinking about it. I went to visit her around Christmas time, and she's older. She used to cook. Oh man, she used to cook the most delicious food for me when I'd go over, and she can't really cook anymore. Her body's just is hurting all the time, and I remember I went over to see her at Christmas time, and we brought her a gift, and I remember she was kind of scrambling around the house looking for something to give us, and she didn't have stuff. She doesn't have kids in her house, so she doesn't have toys or anything like that. So she's just looking for something. I remember her saying like, "Oh, let me give you this, or can I give you that?" And she just pulled out this little frame that she painted at the senior day healthcare center that she went to before the pandemic, and she had painted it. I couldn't find it. I gave it to my daughter. My daughter lost it. I wanted to show it to you, but she just gave me that. She said, "Oh, look, I painted this, and you can have it." She just wanted to give me. She wanted to give us something, and that was just out of love, just because she wanted to give us something. And I imagine that we might feel like that with God. It's like, God, I don't have much. I have this. I can give you this. Aren't you glad that we have a God who sees the heart, who knows the heart, and he sees what it is that's in our heart to give, even when we feel like we don't have much to give. The second thing, and I'm running out of time, but I want to make sure that I focus on the other side of it. This is where Jesus exposes those who might have been responsible for the poverty of people like the widow, like the one we see here. Even though Jesus praised the widow, he also called out, he exposed the evil that was happening for taking advantage of these widows. And he does it right after this passage where he calls out the scribes for devouring the widows' houses. So as I said earlier, Jesus is speaking right in the face of the greedy scribes. I'm pretty sure not all the scribes were taking advantage of the poor widows, but it was bad enough that Jesus had to speak up. And when you read a story like this, it might be easy to think, well, Jesus felt compassion on this woman, but then why didn't he do something for her? I want you to see that Jesus is not just feeling bad for the widow for being poor. Everything that he's doing he's advocating for them. He's protesting against the evil that was making them poor in the first place. He's protesting the wickedness that was making widows like her poor in the first place. So from Jesus's response, both in the passage and the one before it, there are a few things that I want to take away from this. Because I want us to, sometimes we can see ourselves in the position of the widow, and that's good because we want to understand the heart that Jesus is looking for. But I think there's also a warning in this passage for us. That's what I want us to see. There's a warning in this passage for us, is to not fall into the trap, even if it's unintentionally, even if it's accidentally, even if it's just mindlessly. Don't fall into the trap of being like the scribes. Don't fall in the trap of being the one that's responsible, even unintentionally, of the poverty that we see. Or at least don't fall into the trap of being unaware of it and not doing anything about it. So the first thing I want to say is that the church, as we all can probably attest to, the church is not above corruption. And we see that happening with the scribes, what Jesus is calling out, and we see it happening in church. It can happen very easily in church. People can take advantage of money, they can steal money, they can use money in different ways. They can use their power to manipulate, to control, to oppress, to abuse. It's happened. I've experienced it. I know many of you have experienced it. It's a terrible thing. I thought of these couple of quotes. One is coming from an atheist, a scientist, I believe astrophysicist, but another one's coming from C.S. Lewis, who's a famous Christian writer and theologian. So Stephen Weinberg says, "With or without religion, good people can behave well and bad people can do evil. But for good people to do evil, that takes religion." And even C.S. Lewis says, of all bad men, religious bad men are the worst. And of course, he's not just, talking about men as in the male species, but human beings. When you read those quotes, does that sting a little bit, fellow Christian? It should. It should. And even if you don't count yourself as evil, which I hope you don't, but it stings to hear that. What does it take for a good person to do evil? And I think when we think religion, we think church, we think church leaders, we think pastors, we think priests. Those are painful and powerful statements. But do we want to be responsible for that? Do we want to be counted among those who would use what we believe to perpetrate evil? And I think all of us can recognize the difference between what Jesus is talking about and religion. Do you see that what the scribes were doing, what they were about was the religion? They would have been following rules. They would have been doing things that religious people were supposed to do. And yet they were doing evil. They were taking advantage. They were stealing. They were devouring widows' houses. They were religious, but they were not good. They were religious, but they were not godly. And so I think we see obviously that it's possible to be religious because you're following the rules that you think will make you look good enough, but it doesn't look anything like Jesus. It doesn't look anything like the heart of God. And we all know that's not what God is calling for from us. So along with that, Jesus is calling us to go to the poor. Jesus is calling us to not only to find out where those needs are among us in our church community and in the communities where we live, but to give, to advocate, and to stand up, and even to find out ways, is there anything that we as a church do that could possibly make things harder for the poor in our communities? Right? So it's kind of a two-sided question. What are we doing to help? But also, is there anything that we do that could actually be inadvertently probably making things harder? I think of this example with the university that I went to, Azusa Pacific University. And I know they're not a church, but they are a Christian university. They say on their logo, it says God first, right? And they have this big thing all over the campus, God first. But I remember when I was there, and I wish, man, when I think back to my college days, I was so dumb. Like I was just so caught up in the things that I was caught up in, and I didn't really know what was going on. I don't know. It's just what I was. But in the city of Azusa, there was a big fight because the university was expanding, right? And so they're expanding onto another campus, but now they're expanding into the housing. Apartments that used to be affordable apartment units now are becoming college housing. And so now the people who were living there, of course, they raise the rent so they can cause the people who couldn't afford to live there anymore to leave so that they could use it for college housing. And there were like 3 or 4 of these apartment complexes that were being used for college housing. And so now in the name of God first, and spreading the mission of this Christian university, we are now making it harder for the people who were already living there in the city to live there. You see what I'm saying? I know it's different, but it's still the same because it's still the church. It's still the big C church. It's still the work that's supposed to be for God. It's the religious part, right? But we're doing the work of God. We're bringing students here, most of whom didn't even live in the area or even in the state. We're bringing students here to learn to be disciples of Christ. But in order to do that, what are we doing to the people who are already living here? Church, we want to be careful that in spreading what we think is the gospel and advancing what we think is the mission of God, that we don't become so caught up with our idea of how that's supposed to look that we don't actually make things harder for the people that we're supposed to be serving. If it hasn't become obvious already, God cares for the poor. And like I said, it's not that Jesus is saying that they are holy and that they're going to inherit the kingdom just because they are poor. But Jesus does give special attention and I would even say special preference to the poor. He pays attention to them. He thinks about what happened that these people are in this situation. And he calls to the religious institution and says, what are you doing? Remember I said, you touch the money, you mess with the money, people get mad. Jesus is messing with the money, right? And he's calling the church to do something about what they see and to stop doing the things that are causing life to get harder for these people. This is something that we need to respond to, church. This is something that we will have the opportunity to respond to. And I know it's been hard, and I know for myself, finding ways, thinking of ways that we can serve people, because people are out there hurting, right? People are out there in the community, and even more because of the pandemic, people are hurting. But let's not hold back, church. Let's not hold back when we have the opportunity. And I mean, small ways, yes, buy lunch for a homeless person or something like that. That's fine, something like that. But I think even we see Jesus doing this in a bigger way, right? He's not just focusing on the individual person, but he's actually going at the root cause. He's actually going at the root cause of some of why this poverty might have been happening. Maybe the corruption, the evil, the misuse, the abuse, right? He's going at some of these things. Maybe as a church, we can find ways to do that. I love, I don't know if we could ever get back to this, but I love being involved in something like Family Promise. Because Family Promise, it gives us an opportunity to interact with the families and to get to know them, to serve them personally, to spend time with them, right? We're not just like throwing food and money at them and like, okay, you somebody else take care of them. But we're actually spending time with them ourselves, right? We spend the night on the floor so we can get a feeling of what it's like to be one of these families. There's some sacrifice in it, but what I love is that we're actually part of a bigger organization that's actually helping them to get sustainable housing, to affordable housing, to get long-term employment, right? So you're actually going at a long-term solution. It's not just like, here's a sandwich. Again, there's nothing wrong with giving a sandwich to somebody that's hungry, and Jesus talks about that, right? Feeding the poor. But can we also, as a church, be part of the bigger issues, right? Isaiah 58:6-9. God calls his people, is this not the fast that I have chosen for you, to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house, when you see the naked, to cover them, and not to hide yourself from your own flesh and blood, your own kin? Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicators shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and he will say, here I am. Church, we want to be a people who is about this. We want to be advocates. We want to be supporting, and when needed, we need to allow ourselves to be called out. I'm thankful, so thankful that we are not by any means the first people to think about this. There are so many people in history, throughout history, the history of the church, who have been, who have dedicated their lives to serving the most disadvantaged people. We have so many great examples to follow. But it all started with Jesus and his heart to recognize this poor widow. As we close, I think we're just going to listen to a song, and then we're going to go into our breakout rooms. So let this song be kind of a time of reflection for you, what it means to respond to just this heart of compassion that we see coming from Jesus, and what it means to have the same.
Record. Okay, I got all my recording and not recording. That's not easy, guys, to remember all those things, you know? So I feel like, especially when I'm not techie, that's not my natural strength. So nailed it. Okay. I'm going to do announcements today. Johnny, are there slides in your actual PowerPoint that you can show?
Yes, I'll pull that up right now.
Okay, great. We don't have any major announcements today. This is a pretty light announcement thing. Most of the announcements are the kind of normal, regular ones. So we have life groups happening this week in our normal times. We do not have the morning devotions for one more week because we were on vacation last week, and then Jesse and Tammy are on vacation this week. So no morning devotions this week. Giving, like usual, you can go online to get all the information about how to give that way. So you can do that. And just a reminder, and I realized because Jesse and Tammy were on the road, we didn't send out that link. So I apologize. Some of you are just trying to figure out how to log in this morning, but we are using this new River of Life Zoom account, and there is a new link. And so we'll make sure that this next week an email goes out. You can also be using the website through the Zoom links there to be able to log in. So we're using that new Zoom account to be able to, and it's also on the Facebook page, Abner saying, so you can do that. And a couple things just to let you know that we're thinking about. So Dodger game we're hoping for coming in August, so we'll get more updates about that. I know some of you guys are, I know Fred is a Dodger fan. I grew up loving baseball. I haven't gotten into the Dodgers because I grew up in Seattle, but it's just fun. Even if you're not a baseball fan, just go into the game, you know. You can stop sharing, Johnny. And so we're going to be planning something like that. But if any of you also have ideas for fun summer outings, you can be, you know, letting the leadership know, and we can kind of organize that with you, as well as like, as you're feeling comfortable, let's barbecues, guys. So I'm looking forward to that, to just being able to see each other more in person. And then we'll see in terms of the building, June 15th, those of you guys probably have heard, is kind of like a big day for our state in terms of the governor making an announcement of where things are going. And we do believe that will have some influence on our hope for location in Monterey Park. So you can keep praying for that, but we're hoping that there'll be some new news, I guess, to share off of that. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, so stay tuned. We'll continue to give updates about that. Yeah, but it's in the meantime, we'll be having life groups this week. We'll be meeting for prayer before service next Sunday. And then, yeah, let's plan some fun stuff to do this summer. So let me just pray for us as we're closing today. So Jesus, we just thank you. Yeah, again, I feel inspired by this woman and her heart, her abundant heart. And we want that. We want that kind of generosity. We're talking about in our our breakout room, just that picture of how we just can get selfish and get into our own lives and what we need. And we're not thinking about being generous, and we're also not thinking about those that are in need around us. So Lord, I pray, would you make us a church that has your heart, that has your abundant heart, both in our giving, but also in the way that you use us to care for those that are vulnerable in our communities, Lord. So would you give us eyes to see, give us that kind of creativity. And also, God, I pray, would you raise up certain voices in our midst that would be able to, that their heart would shape our heart as a church body, that you would use them. So God, thank you for Johnny and his heart and how he brought that today, Lord. I just pray, would you be raising up those voices in our midst that would really shape who we are as a church, and that we would have your heart, that we would have your eyes to see those who are vulnerable, and we would be able to hear your invitation as a church for how you would use us to be a part of bringing your shalom and your kingdom and your river in this way, Lord. So we just ask for these things in your name, Jesus. We pray this in your name. Amen. All right, just a double amen there. So awesome. Well, let's go ahead and go to gallery view like we do.
Gallery view.
And unmute ourselves. And if anybody wants prayer afterwards, please stay afterwards. Oh, Wes got the Trinity shirt on, representing. I like that. Old school, oldie but a goodie,
I like that. I can help. That's good for our theme today.
Yeah, that is good.
So you go
Yes.
to gallery.
Yeah, if you go to on the top right where it says view, Bonnie, if you click that, it's there's a gallery view. And then you can see everybody. So, all right, we'll see you guys later. Thanks so much. Oh,
God
sorry,
bless you.
Bonnie.
Lost
Bye.
everybody.
Good day, guys.
Bye.
Prayer, please stay out there.
Bye.
Bye.
Good to see
Oh,
everyone.
well. Okay.
See you. Bye, Bonnie.
Bye.
Bye, Bonnie.
Bye, Bonnie.
Good to be with you.
Guys. Be good. Stay cool.
You too.
I
Oh
can only
my
promise you
gosh,
to do one of those things.
that's true.
Okay.
105 on Tuesday. It's like, oh